The topic that I would be discussing today would be audience analysis. And within this topic, there are two things that are very important for having or writing or composing effective technical writing. So, in order to achieve effective technical writing or communication, you need to achieve audience recognition and audience involvement as well. So, I would be first discussing audience recognition with you. As the name suggests, audience, for writing effectively, you need to recognize your audience. Who are your audience? What is their level of understanding? And I'm going to discuss it in detail in the further slides. So moving on, first we need to see who are your audiences. Okay. So while writing your technical document, you need to ask certain questions before writing a technical document, like who is your reader? What is his or her level of understanding? What is her position in relation to your job title? And if you not ask these questions, then what will happen? Your technical writing will miss the mark. Definitely, when your readers would audience would not be able to understand what you're writing, definitely its purpose would be useless. So then your writing may contain certain terms, certain jargons, and acronyms like abbreviations or acronyms. The reader may not understand just because due to the difference in the knowledge you have and the one that your audience has. And then the tone of writing will not be appropriate for management or subordinates as well. So you have to vary your tone, you have to choose your words, you have to use everything according to your audience's level of knowledge, interest, skills, anything. So who are your audience? They follow a procedure because they follow your guidelines. So if the guidelines are not appropriate, they would not be able to reach the goal that you want them to achieve. Besides this, then audience answers a request as well, because if it's like we have studied different types of letters, in those cases they answer request as well. So and they make a decision as well. And then the last thing they do is that they file the document for future reference as well, because audience is like your first hand communicators, and their perspective is very important for all of you. If you do not ask these questions, it will create a lot of problem for you people, because the main purpose of or the main essence of writing is to communicate with your audience, so that would be vanished. Moving on, there are different types of audiences if you try to recognize your audience, which includes high tech audience, low tech audience, lay audience, and multiple audience. So first of all, I would be discussing who are high tech audience. um, So high-tech audience are those audience who are expert in your field. They have the same knowledge as you have, and they work directly with you in your department. Let's suppose if you are the students of electrical engineering department, your classmates are high-tech audience. Your teachers, your lecturers are higher tech audience because they have that knowledge of your field as you people have. In fact, they have a little more knowledge than you, but the basic knowledge is the same. So they share their educational background and knowledge with you. Just as I said that those people who are like your seniors or your classmates who are from the same educational background, which is electrical engineering, it means that they're high tech audience. Now they share their jargons and acronyms. For example, if you want to explain something to me, and that explanation includes certain terms that are very specific to your engineering field. So even if though I'm a teacher, but I would not be able to understand certain terms just because my field is not or my educational background is not similar to your educational background. So in that case, you need to figure out who are your high tech audience. If they belong from your same field, from the same domain, then you can use jargons and acronyms. I may have explained earlier as well what are jargons. Jargons are those technical terms that are very specific to your field or your register. So, and then the writing to high-tech reader is easy because the writer does not need to define the jargons, and definitely when you do not need to go to the nitty-gritty of the things, like you do not need to explain the acronyms you're using, you do not need to explain the graphs you are making in your field, or the jargon that you're using. Definitely less explanation, more benefit for you, less easier to convey the meaning, and then you would not be able you would not be worried if your audience are able to understand or not, because you would have a confidence that those people are also from the same educational background, so there would be no confusion. So so there's no need to define terms or provide background information to the high tech audience, which is very clear. I have already explained it. Now, these are the high tech audience who have the same educational background, who have the knowledge of the jargon that you're using, the technical terms, the acronyms you're using. or the complex graphs you use. You do not need to add more explanation to them. These are the high-tech audience. Now moving to the next audience, that are low-tech audience. Low-tech audience are those audiences which can include your bosses, your subordinates, or your colleagues in other companies and co-workers in the other department. Now, why would your HOD, why would the VC would be a low-tech audience? Even he's a professor, even he has a highest post. Why wouldn't he be a high-tech audience instead of low-tech audience? Because most of the times, let's suppose if you think about your HOD, he may be into the managerial field from a long time. So in that case, he may be away from the technical jargons that he used to use before, or the instruments that you people use in your labs. He may not be able to understand them properly because now he's not into the practical field, he's not into the technical field. So even though he has the same level of expertise, in fact a level of expertise more than you, but then since he's away from the practical perspective of that field, so he can be considered low tech audience, in which you need to, if you are going to mention some acronym, he may feel that he has heard that acronym, but for once you need to remind him what does that acronym, what does the term stands for. So that's why he's a low tech audience. Besides this, your subordinates, let's suppose your juniors, could be a low tech audience because they have a little less level of knowledge than you people. And then the colleagues in other companies, because when your colleagues are working in other companies, then they may have the same knowledge or same field, but they would not be able to understand what's going on in your own company and what's going in your institute. And secondly, the co-workers in other department. Let's suppose your admin branch and your coordinators may know the subjects that you're studying, a little bit of technical terms like the names of your labs and instruments, but they would not know what is your course about. So the admin staff who knows about your subjects, a basic overview of that, but they do not know the details of it. Those all people are low tech audience. And then they are familiar about the technology. As I mentioned, the admin or the lab instructors or everything, they are familiar about the technology you're writing about, but they do not know their function. So they have just a small level of knowledge, not a very detailed knowledge of what you're doing. So I can give you an example. Let's suppose you are an electrical engineer. So as in that perspective, the accountant, the technician, or the designers over there would not are your low audience, because the accountant would not know the technical terms or the functions of what you're performing, but they may know the names of the technology or the products or the whatever you're using in the lab. Now, since the low-tech reader is not in your normal writing loop, so you need to provide the background knowledge. Since they are not part of your directly at the same level of your, they do not have the same background knowledge. So when you're writing something, you need to give a little explanation to those people. Like for the first time, you can explain what does it stand by, different acronyms, to just to familiarize them with those terms, because they would not be able to understand. And low-tech audience are those people who work around you and they have little knowledge about your jargons or acronyms. They do have a knowledge, they do know that these acronyms are used, but they do not know what does it stand for. So for the first time, if you're explaining these terms, you're going to study in the next slide as well. But for now, I can explain it to you that you can either add these explanations of these acronyms by the end of the glossary, or you can just explain these terms within the round brackets after writing the acronym or any technical term for the low tech audience. Now moving on to the next type of audience, which are lay audience. Lay, as a name suggests, you may know that a lay people or those people who are common people who have no knowledge of your field at all. These are the common people. And now they do, what is the purpose or what will be achieved? They are those people who have no idea what is going on here. Whatever you're going to write, they have no idea about your technical terms or anything you have to write it. So they neither work for your company nor have any knowledge about the field of your expertise. So these are the people, like let's suppose uh, the people who are working as um, who just workers who just come and clean your rooms. They do not have any idea what you're doing. So these are the people who are very common people who are just away from your field of expertise. they're unfamiliar with the subject matter that you're studying. They do not have any idea of the technology that you are talking about or you work on. So, in order to explain terms or your field to such kind of people who have no knowledge or zero knowledge about your work, you need to provide depth of detail, and but your language should be simple. It should not contain heavy jargons or technical terms which would be uncomprehendable to the people you're talking to. So just so your language should be precise, like it should be simple, it should be short, and there should be depth of detail in it, and then you can use simple graphs to explain it to them. And you should avoid jargons, you should avoid using abbreviations or acronyms. But if there's a need to use those jargons and abbreviations or acronyms, there's a condition for that, then you need to give an in-depth explanation to each of the jargons that stands for. And then you have to give background knowledge of those abbreviations, your acronyms, or the jargons you are using, not just a dictionary definition, or like for low tech audience, you need to just write it in the round brackets. That would not be enough. You need to give an explanation of maybe 3 to 4 lines. Another type of audience are multiple audiences. Otherwise, there is another type which is called multicultural audience. I have not covered it here because it would be covered in the last topic of this slide as well. And please remember, the topic that I'm teaching to you people is actually this topic goes on to 2 weeks in the year outline. So I may cover it now, but do not feel like I have covered everything now. So this is a lot. So I may take less class the next time. So coming up to the multiple audiences, some multiple audiences, whenever you correspond to somebody, it is not always sent to just one type of audience. Sometimes correspondence has multiple audiences as well. So some multiple readers are not familiar about the subject matter because those mixed audience or those multiple audience can include high tech, low tech, and lay audience at the same time. So that is a very difficult situation in which you have to think that what kind of writing would be suitable for the people you're talking to. So for this kind of diversity in your audience, you need to figure out that what kind of information is appropriate for all the people that you're talking to. So background knowledge is important, and because some of the readers may not be familiar with some concepts, so you need to provide background knowledge, and then you need to provide reference for those people who are unable to understand that what you're talking to, or you can give reference about the jargons that you're using or the terms that you're using for the appropriate purposes. Then you can explain jargons and acronyms as well for the one time, just for the low tech and low audience, so they could understand and be at the same pace as your high tech audience as well. So, for example, when you're writing a report, most people assume that the supervisor will be the only reader, but this might not be the case. It can be forwarded to the manager and so on, because the manager would not be of the same field. So, in that case, you need to explain certain terms that your audience or your reader would be able to understand. This slide. So, the next topic that I would be discussing is defining terms for different audience levels. So definitely, we were talking about it right now as well, that the jargon, the explanation of jargon, abbreviations, acronym differs with the individuals you are talking to, if they are high tech, low tech, or lay audience. So in that case, to define terms that might be unfamiliar to audiences at other levels, if you're if you're supposed to define those terms, then you need to do three things. The first thing is that the words or phrases that define your terms should be either presented either parenthetically or in glossary, as I mentioned before as well. So if you need to explain those terms that you're using, that technical jargon, then in that case you can just put that explanation after the word in the round brackets, or you can just give the definition at the end in the glossary as well. So the second thing that you can do to define the terms is that the sentences that define your terms can be either put to the glossary or following the unfamiliar terms as well. So you can just use sentences to define those words as well. And then in case of lay audience who do not have any knowledge of what you're saying, then you can just write extended definitions in the glossary or within the text to explain. It could be even the explanation could even go till 1 or 2 paragraphs. So you can give extended definitions and explanations of the terms that you're explaining to the lay audience as well. So this is how you can actually um, define the terms to different people. Like you can add it in the glossary, you can give it in the parenthetical or the round brackets, and then you can give extended definitions or on the basis of one or two paragraphs as well, even more paragraphs as well, to the lay audience to give certain explanation of a certain term. Now moving on, what are the ways to define terms? Since high-tech audience are proficient in your field, so there is no need to define anything. You can use acronyms and abbreviations without providing definitions for high-tech readers. So there's no need to explain those acronyms and abbreviations because they are from the same level of expertise. They have the same educational background as you people. So for that reason, there is no need to define those terms for high tech. But if your audience are low tech, then you need to give explanation in the parenthetical parentheses, or you can give brief definitions in the glossary as well. That would suffice. That would be okay with it, because low tech audience have a certain amount of knowledge, but they do not have as much knowledge as the high tech audience. So just a dictionary definition or a glossary definition or a round breaking definition would suffice for the low tech audience. And low tech readers could be at your company who have different area of expertise, and they are unfamiliar with the high tech acronyms and abbreviations, but are familiar with the work environment. Like let's suppose, what does ATM stands for? For people like us who use the word ATM but we do not know what does it stand for. Let's suppose, I'm not saying that all of you do not know it, but it stands for asynchronous transfer model. So let's suppose you have a general knowledge, but what is the function or what is this technology used for? But maybe you were unfamiliar um, with the word that it stands for. So in that case, if I explain it in the round brackets that ATM stands for asynchronous transfer model, so that would be enough for once. I do not need to repeat again and again and give a lot of definition because you know what is ATM used for. So that's enough. But if we talk about lay audience, they need more information. So you need to give term plus type plus distinguishing characteristics. So the term could be a car. So if you need to explain the term, like what kind of type is it? So the example is a car is a vehicle that contains four wheels. Now the four wheels are distinguishing characteristics. Now everyone knows it, but if you consider it as a child, if that person is a child who doesn't know what is a car, then he needs more explanation. You need to define the characteristics that makes it a car. So in that case, if you're talking to the lay audience, you need to tell the term, what is its type and what are its distinguishing features, so he can remember afterwards that this is a car. If he sees four tires or four wheels and somebody is driving it as a vehicle, then he would know that it's a car. This is a small example. So in this case, if you are talking or communicating to the lay audience, they need more information, then you should place the definition in the front matter or and then appendix a glossary of a document. Okay? It is very common that you can just, and like the glossaries are at the end. Afterwards, you can use endnotes as well in a report with other research material. If you know about them, the endnotes or footnotes are usually written at the last or the corner of the margins of the page, in the bottom margins of the page. So if there's a term that a person is unable to explain, you can just put asterisk or one, and then at the end of the page, at the corner of the page, you can explain that term as well. And then you can use pop-up screens for online help incorporated into the internet or extranet sites. Those links that you call like hyperlinks can be used to if your text gets away from what you're talking just because you're giving explanations to somebody, then what you can do is you can put hyperlinks in it. So if anybody who needs explanation can click that hyperlink and go to that information if he seeks more information. Otherwise, for those people who are high tech or low tech audience can read it as it is without opening the hyperlink. So this could be the case as well. I hope this is clear, and please remember that lay audience have no knowledge of your high tech audience jargon that you're using. So moving on, the next topic is multicultural audience. I talked about it before as well, but since I gave it a pretty different domain, so I kept it as a separate topic. So moving on to this topic, there are certain guidelines when you are communicating with multicultural audience. Now, what are multicultural audience? people like in United States, people are blacks are living there, white people are living there, Chinese are living there. So they're the place where people belong for different cultures. If they are living together and if you're communicating with them, then how are you supposed to communicate? Because there are a lot of things that can be misleading to people from different cultures. They may feel stereotyped because once I told you people as well that what's the significance of red color for Americans and what's the significance of red color for Chinese. So you need to be careful when you're dealing with multicultural audiences. So if you talk about the guidelines, the first thing is that you need to define acronyms and abbreviations because in case when you are living in United States, maybe one person would be able to understand your jargon because he's from the same domain, but a person from a different culture would not be able to understand those jargons and acronyms. So in that case, you need to define, not explain, but you need to define the acronyms and abbreviations. Then the second thing you can do is you can avoid jargon and idioms because you know that idioms is those phrases or those figurative language which can have multiple meanings, or the person who is not from that field from your culture would not be able to understand. जिस तरह हमारे यहाँ उर्दू में मुहावरे होते हैं, so a person from a Punjabi background may be able to understand, but a person from this Pashtun background may not be able to. Similarly, when there are idioms in the Pashtun language, a Punjabi or Sindhi will not be able to understand. So there are culture-specific idioms and figurative languages as well. So when you're dealing with multicultural audiences, it is advised that you should avoid using jargons and idioms as well. Then the third guideline could be you can distinguish between nouns and verbs. Sometimes the verbs are used as the same verbs are used in nouns and verbs as well. If you talk about the word swimming in a sentence, if you it is used, it's a verb, but swimming is my best hobby. Let's suppose if this is the sentence, in that case, swimming is used at the place of a noun. So when you're dealing with a multicultural audience, he may not be able to understand if it is working as a noun in this sentence or it's working as a verb in this sentence. So these are the small things that you need to think about. Then you should watch for the cultural biases and expectations as well. I explained it earlier as well. There are a lot of norms that are followed in traditions, which may feel the other person from the different field may feel threatened for that reason. Let's suppose um, I explain a reason for you in example earlier to you people as well. Like sometimes when the elder people come into our homes, they put their hands on the heads of these girls or let's suppose the young boys. So it's a matter of respect and love for us. But if you talk about the Western culture, they would think that they are subjugating for the females. So you should watch for the cultural biases. Sometimes a person doesn't feel negative, but just due to that cultural lens from which we see, due to that reasons, people develop certain expectations and the negative vibes about you. So you need to watch for those cultural biases as well. Then you should be careful when using the slash marks because for some people it stands for or and for some people it stands for and. So is it an option or is it another example? It's a very small example, you can leave it as well, but this is a small explanation to it. Yes, I know I'm receiving the messages at the moment, but I'm going to discuss it afterwards so they do not become a part of the audio since I may upload it on YouTube as well. Then you can avoid humor and puns as well because humor is very specific to the cultures at times. Specifically in Pakistan, if we talk about those humors and puns, they're mostly related to a person who belongs from a certain background. Like we see that there are a lot of jokes made on Sardars. We see a lot of jokes that are made on Pashtuns. We see a lot of jokes that are made on Punjabis, Sindhis. So you should avoid making those humors and puns that you may feel that you may seem more cunning or something like this, but this is not true. It would give a negative image about you people. So you should avoid making humor because the other person may take it wrong as well because he belongs from another culture. Then you can leave space for a translation as well because when a person is belongs from a certain different background, he may be unfamiliar to the language you are using. So you need to leave that space for translation because sometimes when the same words are translated into another language, then in that case the meaning or the essence of that word changes as well. So if somebody is translating and you feel like that person hasn't understood as you communicated, it is because the when you translate something from one language to another language, it sometimes loses its essence. And this is what happens with our writings when we teach students to uh, translation in English, because this happens in your federal board or the board system, and this is why you are unable to make correct sentences in English, because there is no proper translation from one language to another language. It loses its essence. Then you should avoid figurative language, as I said before as well. So you should avoid figurative, flowery idioms, metaphors, similes, humor, fun. You should avoid using these terms when you are talking to people from different cultural backgrounds. So you should accommodate the language barriers and the cultural customs of all the people to talk about something. So it means that among all those audiences, you need to be careful with, you need to be more careful with the multicultural audience, because your words could become something else when somebody else hears from a different cultural background as well. Next topic that we are going to discuss is sexist language. So if I would have been in the class, I would have asked you people what's the difference between sex and gender. But right now, I can explain it to you people that sex is the biologically determined uh, uh, thing. Like let's suppose I'm bisex, I'm female. So this is biologically determined. But if you talk about gender, gender is socially determined. Now, socially determined norms and actually roles are gender. Let's suppose if a girl lives in Asian culture, she may not be allowed or appreciated to, let's suppose, ride a motorbike, because it is said that like boys ride a bike. So this is a gender socially determined role that is given to us by society. Let's suppose it's said that men can't cry in our society, which is a common norm. So let's suppose it's said that this is a socially determined role of a gender. But if we go into the same, if we talk about the same gender, we have the same sex. But if we go into the Europe, the roles for girls would be different. The socially determined gender roles would be different as compared to the females living in Asia or some other nation. So sexist language is something that you should avoid using such terms which may feel offensive to your readers, because sexism creates problems through omission, unequal treatment, stereotyping, as well as through the word choice. So we would be seeing for the ways from which we can avoid sexism. The one way of avoiding sexism is that omission. Now, how you can omit the words? Most of the times, it is believed that females are subjugated, and mostly men are showed that way. So in those cases, ignoring women or referring to them as secondary is very common. So So if we talk about the example, let's suppose if I could give you an example, like radium was discovered by a woman, Marie Curie. So instead of just mentioning it down that Marie Curie is a woman and she made a discovery and it's a strange thing, you can just write it down as um, ra- radium was discovered by name instead of writing Mrs. All right, I have Then another way of avoiding sexism is that you can do unequal treatment. You can avoid doing unequal treatment. Like you can avoid using modifiers that only describe females. Like let's suppose instead of writing Mrs. Acton, you can write Jan Acton. You can write the name. Explain the unequal treatment. Now comes the stereotyping. Now what is stereotyping? When you assign in gender roles, when you assign specific characteristics to a gender role, like I explained at the moment. So when we stereotype, when we say that girls are specified to do these acts and boys are specified to do these acts, in these cases, you should avoid using stereotyping. So when we're going to go into the further details in the next slides, you may understand stereotyping is not for the gender roles. Stereotyping could be cultural as well. I would be explaining in the next slides. Then comes pronouns. Sometimes we use pronouns to which specify one gender. Let's suppose we most of the times when we are talking about a neutral thing, but we use masculine pronouns like he, him, and his. Apparently, this would sound okay, but sometimes the feminists or the people who are advocates of female rights may have sounded do not sound feel like it's right. They feel subjugated. So in those cases, you can use plural generic pronouns like there to avoid uh, the appreciation of one gender, let's suppose. So you can use the neutral nouns which could be used for both the genders, that could be they and their. Then there comes a few nouns which you can avoid. Let's suppose you can avoid using masculine nouns. For example, um, you can use masculine nouns. For example, mankind instead of that, because a man is a word that shows man, males. So instead of it, you can use the word like um, humanity. Then instead of saying policeman, you can say police force. Then instead of saying chairman, you can use the word chairperson. So you can use neutral terms, neutral nouns, which could refer to both the people instead of just the males or just the females. You can use both of them. The next topic is audience involvement. At the beginning of the lecture, I explained it to you people that sometimes when you talk about audience involvement, you need in order to write a technical document, you not only need to recognize your audience, but you need to involve your audience as well. So once you have decided, once you have recognized who are your audience, then there's a time to involve your audience. Now, how you can involve your audience is through different means, and this is how we can do it. Now, if you want to involve your audience, there are two ways. You need to have a personalized tone, and then you need to have a reader benefit for those students, for your audience or for your readers. So a person is not going to listen to you if he is not going to know that what is the benefit of listening to it. So you need to achieve the reader benefit as well. Now, if you need to involve your audience, you need to achieve personalized tone. Now comes how you can achieve that personalized tone. You can achieve that personalized tone by using pronouns. You can use pronouns, and when use pronouns, what happens is that it makes your text look more like, it humanizes your text. It personalizes your correspondence, because if you're not using any pronoun, it seems like the text is computer generated. So you can use the words like you and your pronouns, which shows that your text is reader centered. But if you use the pronouns like we, us, and our, it means that you are taking them as a team. Let's suppose we are going to do it together. This is our job to do it. So it means that you are acknowledging your readers to be a part of it. This is an appreciated way. But if you use the words like, continuously use the words like I, me, and mine, it seems that you are egocentric and you are not appreciating your readers as a part of your audience. So in that case, yes, sometimes you can use the words I just to show that your authority. But if you continuously use these pronouns and you do not use the other pronouns like you, your, and we, us, it means that your text is egocentric and you are not appreciating your readers as a part of your text. Then there could be like, you can use names. If you need to personalize your tone, you can use names like, you can use first names and you can use last names. Now the term is that when you can use the first name and when you can use the last name. If you're familiar with that person, if you have an informal connection with that person, you can achieve that personalized tone by using the first name. But if you are unfamiliar with that person, you are having an informal conversation with that person, you can achieve that personalized tone by using that last name of that person. Then if you want to achieve that conversational tone, that sense of familiarity with that person, you can use contractions as well. Most of the times it is said that in the formal writings, in the academic writing, you should not use contractions like words can't and something like that. Yes, but if you want your technical document to sound personalized, to involve your readers, to involve your audience, then you can use contractions to sound conversational, as it fits the normal discussion, so yeah, they can involve themselves. Like you can use the words can't, we are, it's something like this. Now, this is the personalized tone which can help you involve your audience. Another way of involving your audience is by showing them the reader benefit. How you can show the reader benefit is that you can state the benefit clearly at the beginning of your document, so your readers would realize that if this document is relevant to you or relevant to them or not. So you can state the benefit clearly. Another way of achieving this reader benefit is by using positive words and positive verbs. Let's suppose if I say that if you're going to listen to this project, it would help you in doing your final project. This is how I started my lecture. It means that I gave you a reason to listen to my lecture, let's suppose. So this was a positive way. Negative way could have been that if you're not going to listen to my lecture, you're going to fail my exams, you will not be able to complete your final project. This was a negative tone. So could use positive words to involve your or attract your readers to listen to you. And you can use positive verbs as well. to sell the benefit. Let's suppose you can use positive verbs as like accomplish, active, achieve, produce, organize, improve, establish, analyze, promote. These words can actually make the reader attracted to listen to you. And then there's an example as well mentioned in the slides that the negative could be we have received your complaint letter. On the other hand, you can say thank you for your writing to us about your services. So both of the thing is that somebody has registered a complaint, but a positive way of saying something to it that thank you for receiving, letting us, thank you for writing to us about your services. This could be a positive way. Then moving on to the last topic, and please be careful about this topic because this topic is the one on which your final project is based. So please be careful about it. So the last topic is intercultural communication. All right, whenever the multicultural audience or multiple audience communicate, this is called intercultural communication. So intercultural communication is a communication in which multicultural audience communicate. So in other terms, we can refer it to as the interaction that occurs between people whose cultures are so different that the communication between them is altered. So we can develop intercommunication competence by first acknowledging potential barriers and then by employing several strategies to overcome those barriers. So first we would be discussing about that perspective in which we would be talking about the barriers that people face while in an intercultural community where different cultures are living at the same time and you have to communicate in that community and then how you can overcome those barriers. So please be aware of how these work because you are supposed to work on the final project on the same topic. So first we can discuss about the potential barriers. The first barrier that we face is anxiety. Let's suppose when we go into an intercultural community, we are anxious that how the other people are going to understand us, what would they be similar to us or not. So this is an anxious or anxiety that we face when we go into a new setting where different people from different cultural backgrounds exist. So this is one of the barriers that you feel stressed out. The second thing is that assuming similarity or differences. When we go into a new culture, sometimes we're unaware that sometimes we have an assumption that a person from a different cultural background would have no similarity with our culture, so there would be complete difference. But when you become a part of that community and you observe their practices, you come to know that they're not just the differences, but they are the similarities in your culture as well. So this is one of the barriers that you assume, you presume that there would be a lot of differences between and it would be difficult to suggest because of the anxiety you have. Then the third thing is ethnocentrism. What is ethnocentrism? It is the belief that your culture is superior to the other person's culture. When you feel superior, that your ethnic background is superior to other person, then it is a barrier to communicate with the other person because you look down upon others. So this is one of the barriers that you feel superior. The fourth type is stereotyping and prejudice. Stereotyping, I explained stereotyping in the sexist language, but it was just stereotyping on the gender. But stereotyping has a separate explanation as well. Stereotyping or the stereotypes are those attributes that we connote to specific group of people um, or certain characteristics that we ascribe to a group of people. Prejudice is the same thing that we have a rigid attitude towards a group of people that we think that if that person belongs to this group, he would be have certain these negative characteristics. This is the prejudice. So you should avoid having prejudice and stereotyping about some people. So whenever you are going to meet somebody and you say that this person belongs from a different this community, he would have these qualities. So this is wrong. This is one of the potential barriers. Another potential barrier is that incompatible communication codes. The norms varies with the cultures. Let's suppose in certain communities, a lot of hand gestures are used while communicating. And sometimes the tone of the person in a certain community is loud. And this would be a proper way of talking. They would not be fighting, but the other person from another community whose language has a soft dialect, he may feel that the other two people are fighting just because they have a louder voice and they are using a lot of harsh expressions and they're using a lot of hand gestures. But since due to the miscommunication between the cultures, he would feel that miscommunication of those codes that if specific to the culture, he may feel it is a barrier to communicate. He may feel that he may feel or develop certain misconceptions about that culture, but just because by assuming that those people are fighting or those people have a harsh behavior just because they have loud voices, let's suppose, but it could be because of their dialect. The dialect pronunciation could be louder as well. Then you can have incompatible norms and values as well. Let's suppose our values are not just determined by the culture, it is determined by religion, it is determined over different things. So a person over here, if let's suppose if somebody wears a hijab in our society, it would not be considered as submissiveness. But if a female would be wearing a hijab in a European society, it may be considered as a submissiveness, a superiority from the male gender. So the norms and values are specific to culture. Instead of making some assumption about that culture, you need to realize that how what is the crux or the core value of that culture in that society. Now moving on, these are were the potential barriers. But now if we move on that how you can overcome these barriers, then you need to be competent in overcoming them by following certain strategies. So, how you can follow these strategies, that you can acquire accurate knowledge about before making an assumption about that society or that culture or that person belonging from a different culture. You can acquire accurate knowledge about them. How you can acquire accurate knowledge about their culture? You can make a formal study, you can do observation, or you can do immersion. Formal study could be you can read about their culture through internet, encyclopedia, or any other medium. But then besides this, you can do observation as well. Observation could be done. All right, moving back to the slide. Um, First, you can formally study that culture to avoid and making any misconception about that culture. Then you can directly observe by being a part of that culture. You can observe their customs and values. Then there's immersion. Immersion is the same thing that when you become a part of that culture, when you communicate with these people, your misconceptions become clarified. So being immersion is something when you become a part of that culture and your barriers are actually vanished just because of observing something. Then you can adopt an appropriate attitude. You can tolerate ambiguity. When suppose you somebody says something, instead of being offended, you can imagine that person's values are different, his cultural background is different, so maybe he doesn't mean the thing that you have understood. So you can tolerate the confusion, ambiguity. So, okay, you should be open-minded to avoid those confusion and to tolerate the cultural differences among people. And then you should be altruistic as well. Altruistic means that you should be kind, you should be sympathetic to other person's values and norms. And the third thing is that you should develop culture centered skill. What is culture centered skill is that you should practice listening. You should not feel offended. You should listen and understand somebody else's values and acknowledge it as well. Then you should develop intercultural empathy. Empathy is something when you do not uh, have, you are not ethnocentric, which means that you do not feel that your culture is superior to the other person. You do not look up down upon the person. So when you do not look down upon somebody else's culture, it means you are empathetic, you are sympathetic to the other person's value. And this is how you develop flexibility to other person's norms and ideas as well. And you tolerate the ambiguities and you become open minded as well. This is it for the